Joining us, author of the Cross-Section newsletter on Substack, Paul Waldman, professor of public policy and economics at the University of Michigan, Betsy Stevenson, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson, still with us, and MS Now senior White House reporter, Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, how's the grass out there?
The grass right over here looks pretty good on the north lawn. On the south lawn, Katie, there's not much of it left. I was in the White House briefing room and I overheard one journalist ask the question, what's going to happen to the Easter egg roll this upcoming spring? Because most of the grass is gone because the president, he cleared out the area, right, to put this helipad, which one could make the case the helipad was needed, maybe. But then he actually had it removed because he said that it was sloping. They put the new helipad down, and that's what he was showing the cameras there. And he made it clear that it could withstand any strike, suggesting if there was a bomb or something that it would be able to keep it from being destroyed. So the president saying that it was going to be there on the South Lawn beyond all of our times on this planet, Katie.
So I asked this next question seriously and without snark, even though it might sound a bit snarky. Does Donald Trump know how bad his numbers are? Does he know how angry people are? Or, Vaughn, is Natalie shielding him from it?
It's a very good question, Katie, and this is part of the more insulated second Trump administration that we are watching. And for the President of the United States, I believe that it's more, based off of conversations, an instance in which he believes that part of his legacy is the physical structure around the White House and beyond, and that these are means that he is going to take. There is sort of this disconnect from reality that Americans, as you just heard, they're watching him focus on these construction projects that are costing in the hundreds of millions of dollars at the same time that their loved ones are in theater in the Middle East, that they are struggling to pay grocery prices, and yet he isn't changing course. And that is why, frankly, it was not anticipated that he was going to go and show off his helipad. And when they announced that the cameras should come to the doors so that the president could lead them on the tour, it led to a lot of everybody kind of looking around, because that's where the president's focus is uniquely on a day like today. And so whether he is wholly aware, he's dismissive of his approval ratings and places blame so often on others, as we've heard him say, right? He said that if Republicans lose the midterm elections for Senate and the House, it's not because of him, but it's because of them.
Let me play a little bit more from Donald Trump on his ballroom helipad construction project tour.
They can have events on it. They can have people go there for cocktails and then walk to the ballroom after that's finished. We can have really incredible. This is unbelievable for state. Without even having to go into the White House, they get out of the car on the beautiful new roadway. They get out of the car and they walk down this path onto that, and they can have cocktails and everything outside of the White House, and then they go into the ballroom. Even the military, they can use it like that. And we have the ballroom is so much a military component with the drones and the bomb shelters and everything else that we have in there. So it's really, that started off as a ballroom. And before we started work, the military came to see me and they say, sir, we have an opportunity to do something incredible here. And we've been trying to do it for 100 years, but we've never had an opportunity like that. So I had to make that decision. And I said, look, go ahead, design what you want. And that goes down 5 stories. It goes down almost 65 feet.
What's in those 5 stories?
Well, I'm not allowed to discuss that, but a lot of very detailed stuff.
Cocktails and bomb shelters. I mean, honestly, Rick Wilson, what the heck is going on?
Look, Donald Trump is a guy who is disconnected somewhat from reality. He's disassociated from the real job of president, and he thinks he is either an infomercial or a reality TV show host again. And he wants people to see the ballroom and the gold leaf on everything and the weird Liberace meets Saddam decorating style in the Oval Office. That's what interests him now, and that and money, of course, which is why the crypto bros are all there today. Really, he's disconnected from the political impact of it. He really doesn't care. I mean, for my as a former Republican, I say this to the guys who stayed in the party. He doesn't care about you. He's never been a Republican, and his very Versailles sort of approach to an election where people are screaming about their economic fears is really dragging down He doesn't have to run again. The rest of these guys are taking all the radiation off of this behavior right now.
I mean, Paul, these numbers, the polling numbers, both from The Economist and from Reuters, they're real bad, really bad. How do they get this low without intervention from the White House, without, a change of approach, strategy from the president himself?
Well, I think the problem really is him. He ran saying, I'm going to bring down all your prices on day one. And of course, that hasn't happened. And, I think a lot of what's going on now, we see him focusing so much on things like the ballroom and the lawn. A lot of that is about his desire for a sense of control. The economy is an enormous and unruly entity. There's no button that Donald Trump can push that says bring grocery prices down or increase jobs. It's very complicated. And he can, on the other hand, say, give me a new helipad, and then it will happen. That I think gives him that sense that he is potent and he has that sense of control. But it's really difficult for him to do big things on the economy. And the things that he has done that have been pretty big haven't worked out well at all. And in fact, especially when you think about the Iran war, have really done damage to the economy. And so now there really isn't all that much that he could do to suddenly turn around America's economic fortunes. And I think at some level he knows that. And so he believes that if he talks about the things that he is interested in, that he cares about, then that will somehow, kind of divert everyone's attention, or at least make them think that he is still strong and forceful and effective. But even if he wanted to, even if he sat down with his closest economic advisors and said, tell me how we can bring inflation down to 2% by November, there wouldn't be much they could tell him to make that happen. I mean, maybe Betsy could speak to that more than I could, but there's not that much that he can do at this point. And so he's focused on the things that he really cares most about, which is all this aesthetic stuff and whether or not the lawn is greener than any lawn that's ever existed before.
Betsy, answer Paul's question.
So there's definitely a legitimate point there that trying to bring inflation down between now and November is going to be really, really tough. Are there things that he could do, like getting rid of all of the tariffs, ending the war, trying to bring some stability in? Yes. But I think that kind of the point is the ship has sailed for some of that, certainly in terms of getting it done by November. But I think even more importantly, it goes against what he thought he was going to do. I do think he had a vision that he was going to come in and reshape the U.S. economy in a particular way. And he just hasn't really been able to do it, right? He's come in and he got Elon Musk to help him fire a bunch of government workers. But it turns out, actually, those government workers did some useful things, boring things to the president. But boring things are actually the stuff that make the U.S., the economy and the government services work well for people. So then we've got, we've got food safety issues. We've got all sorts of issues arising. So that didn't, that didn't do miracles the way he thought it was going to. He tried to do tariffs, and that actually caused a lot of inflation, and it also caused big legal battles, and he's been back and forth. And, we're already seeing GM announced this week they were doing some layoffs. So it didn't give him the manufacturing boost he was hoping for. So he's either going to walk back everything he believed in, or he's got to stick his fingers in his ears and say, la, 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 I'm building a ballroom. And I think what we're seeing is he's doing the latter.
Yeah, but I think there's a third option. And I think that third option would be to at least appear like he's focused on trying to turn it around. I mean, yeah, you can't turn it around between now and November, but you can go out there and tell the American people that they're not crazy, that it has been hard, and that there are, new policies he's putting in place or things that he's working on to make it better, to meet them where they are and to acknowledge their fears. He's not doing any of that, which leads me, Rick, to the perpetual question I have. You brought up Republicans a moment ago who are still on his side. These numbers are so bad. The midterms look like they could be so bad for Republicans. We just, we saw some numbers out of Ohio. You have Sherrod Brown leading by 8 points. They're clearly worried about Iowa, sending all of these administration officials up to try and boost the Republican candidates out there. Right. Governor Abbott is neck and neck in a statistical tie with Gina Hinojosa in Texas. Ossoff appears to be running away with it in Georgia. There's all of this data out there that is telling Republicans Donald Trump is dragging them down. We are away from the primaries now. Why have they not made a break from him? Why are they still lashing themselves so tightly to him?
I think I saw an interesting sign last night when Byron Donalds gave his victory speech in Florida for the Republican governor's nomination. He didn't mention Donald Trump one time. He didn't thank Donald Trump. He didn't come out and praise Donald Trump. He didn't say, I thank you, Mr. President, for your total and complete endorsement. He left Donald Trump on the table. Donald Trump is a has-been now to Byron Donalds and to some other Republicans who are figuring it out. It is going to take longer for some who are in deeper red states who believe still that their love of Trump has to be manifested every day to make sure Republican turnout stays up. But, when you saw, I was a real tell to me last night that I think it's starting to seep through who bragged about Trump every 5 minutes. And now he's like, Trump's 15th ex-girlfriend on the, leaving him on the corner somewhere. He really, last night I was shocked that he didn't thank Trump. And I think you're going to see that with more of these guys who a little vestigial survival instinct starts to kick in when they realize Trump isn't popular with Democrats, obviously. He's not popular with independents. He's losing on every key issue that they thought they were going to campaign on. And so it really is a sort of a big tell right now that a lot of them are still too slow to figure it out. But a few of them are starting to put their heads up and say, this I got to get the stink of this guy off of me as soon as I can.